relationship, so they have some immediate blocks in there as the person who is recovering from the hurt. Those relationships that become toxic start small. Empowerment means that you are willing to take on.
Welcome to Rising Above Shadows of Abuse, Rasa.
How do you help people rediscover strength and dignity after a relational crisis, especially for someone who's gone through an abusive relationship?
So are you talking about a former abusive relationship, so they have some immediate blocks in there, or the current relationship has been abusive? So when we've been in an abusive relationship, sometimes we do have to be aware of the fact that we can see threats that are not there more readily. I mean, also back to the human brain and our humanity. Our human brain is built to look for threats. And if we have been in prior threatening relationships, we are going to find more of those because we're trying to avoid any possibility of that. And that puts us at risk of overseeing the threat possibility. So just being aware of that is helpful for somebody. If it has been an abusive relationship, there has to have been some changing and growing of the person who was abusive. That otherwise we're at a dead end. We're just waiting for the next trigger. And the person who has been abused would have to be trusting at some level that has really come to an end, that there's been a change. And most of the time when somebody is an abusive person, they have been abused themselves. So there's some healing pieces for them that are important as an individual that are separate from that marriage. So wherever they found that healing is important. But if we're now at a point where the person who was abusive has truly found healing and knows not to go there again, then the person who was abused has to learn to trust it. And that takes time. I mean, how do we ever get to a point of trusting it? Is seeing consistent behavior that tells us that old behavior is gone. Without that consistency, there's no way forward.
That's true. And that's why people get stuck. And that's where they have trust issues as well.
Sure. And so I suggest that people see trust as a gift. So when I hear people say, you've got to trust me again, there is a piece of that is accurate, that they have to choose when they're going to do that. But there are a couple of mistakes that people make. It's a gift. So they can make it too cheap and they just trust regularly. It doesn't matter what's coming their way. They'll just trust them again. Then there are those who make it too expensive. They're going to make it so hard to ever trust again. And the question for us to always be asking is, am I making it too cheap or too expensive? Am I making it too costly to step here? Trust has to be given. It, in some ways, will never be truly earned. I know people that it doesn't matter what changes the other person has done, no matter what they do, they're like never going to trust. They won't give it. And so they have to at some point decide, am I willing to do that? I mean, I have said to clients before, you should not be trusting this person. I'm watching the behavior. It is not worthy of trust. But I've also seen people where I'm like, at some point you're seeing a consistent pattern of behavior that they're doing that is trustworthy, and you're going to have to choose when you step back into that. But they get to choose. That is their choice as the person who is recovering from the hurt.
So in essence, what you're saying is the individual needs to watch the pattern to see if it's consistent with the way they relate with them, to say, okay, this person is consistently doing things and is earning my trust, or they're trustworthy.
In therapy, we talk about first and second order change. First order change is when we kind of change. It's somebody who has an anger issue isn't dealing with the anger issue. They're just not blowing up anymore. And so you're watching them and they're like, but they don't do what they did before, right? They're just holding it in. You don't trust that, because all it takes is the point when they can no longer hold it in. That's first order change. Second order change is when they go, you know what? I learned that behavior from childhood, or I learned that behavior somewhere else. I've justified that behavior. I have changed that. I now understand what drives that, and it no longer drives it. That's a second order change. Now they are a different person in relationship. And so sometimes it helps the person who is trying to heal to have an outside person going, this looks to me like consistent second order change, not they're just trying not to explode because they know that there are consequences. That's not true change. We change because we recognize that the way we've been behaving is not benefiting us or others around us.
And we want to change the patterns to a better and healthier one, so to speak.
There is a dance there and so for the person who has been abused, an important important skill is to learn boundaries. I'm not going to let you treat me that way, right? What we know from most instances is that it starts small. Those relationships that become toxic start small. And there is a pattern of not setting a boundary and violating the boundary repeatedly, what would be typical boundaries. And so many times, the person has to realize that it's not okay for them to be yelled at. It's not okay for them to be called names. It's not okay for there to be a physical threat. Those are not okay. Those are boundary issues, very clear boundary issues. And it's okay to say, you can't treat me that way. I'm not going to let you do that. And if somebody continues to push on a boundary, they are not safe. And therefore, it's not time to be saving that relationship. However, if you don't have to set a boundary because they are respectful now, they have truly changed and they realize it's not okay to yell. It's not okay to threaten. It's not okay to call names. It's not okay, whatever you put in there, then you can see that there has been some second order change and that you can decide when you're willing to trust again.
Thank you. So what does resilience look like in real life, not just in theory, when someone feels hopeless?
Let's talk about hope for a minute and then we'll get to resilient. So hope has always been, for a long time, no longer, well, it is for some people, but no longer does it need to be this ethereal thing. You feel hope or you don't feel hope. So back in the mid 80s into the early 90s, Charles Snyder, a psychologist, came up with what has been called the hope formula. And there are 3 pieces to the hope formula. And the useful thing about this is if you're going, I'm hopeless, you can ask the question, what's missing from my formula? And so this is actually a skill of resilience to learn how to rebuild hope, build or rebuild hope. So the 3 pieces. First thing is you have to have a goal of what you're trying to get to. And you get to choose that. That is within our capacity of choosing that. So the goal is, what do I want this to look like? If I'm talking about a marriage, what do I want my marriage to look? You have to have that. The second thing you have to have is a clear path to get there. Like, I know what it would take to build this relationship. I know what it would take for me to change. I know what it would take to get there. That's like knowledge. All these books, all the courses I have, that's what I try to give people, is a clarity on what you can move towards and then how to do it, right? It's a roadmap. You have to have that. And then you have to have the third thing, a willingness to do that. All 3 of those come together in hope. If you have those 3 things, if you don't have those things, if you don't know where you're moving, it doesn't matter. I mean, whatever you know or are willing to do, you don't have a clear place to go, they're irrelevant. If you have a place you want to go and you're willing to do it, but you don't have the information, then you're trying to find the information to fill in the blank, right? That's a learning process. Sometimes people know where they want to go. They even know some ways to get there, but they're not willing to do what it takes to get there. And so you're still stuck, right? Every piece of whatever's missing of those 3 things, you're going to be stuck where you are. So that gives you a way of asking the question, given where I am right now, and that is the growth question. Given where I am right now, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? How do I want to do it? Am I willing to do it? And those who are able to name those pieces are building resilience. Now, you can always change that, right? If you realize that where you want to go is not possible, you can change the destination and how you're going to do it. And then the question is, are you willing to go there? So when I'm working with a couple, sometimes I'll have one person who has this idea of where they want to get to. They have the knowledge base to do it and they're willing to do it. And then their spouse says, that's not really what I want. And sometimes we can clarify what they want and get them on board with some place of change. And it can still move in that direction. Sometimes this is not what I want because I have found this other person and I want to move in that direction. And that does change what the first person, the one who wants to save the marriage, it changes what their destination may be. But resilience means that we are able to keep plugging in the pieces and continue moving forward. So resilience research was basically, when we have some trauma, can we get back to ground level? When something happens to us, can we get to ground level? Thriving, in my mindset, thriving is going beyond that. Can we use the struggles in life to actually grow stronger? And if we can do that, then we thrive. We're not just resilient, which is back to here. It's kind of the bounce. Drop the ball, it gets back up to that point again. But thriving is to say, what have I learned from this struggle? What do I change? How can I continue to grow past that so that traumas and the struggles in life actually grow me stronger? If I want to grow my muscles, what do? I pick up heavier stuff. And when I pick up heavy stuff, I'm not getting back to the base level. I'm raising that level. I'm moving to a different level. And so the same is true true in life.
Thank you. So can you share an example of how empowerment changes the trajectory of a struggling relationship?
Yeah, so empowerment can look like lots of things for people. Sometimes empowerment is recognizing they don't have to put up with painful situations that are hurting them, right? That's one level of empowerment. And then they can say, I'm not willing to do that. And can say to the person, I'm not willing to be in this. If you want something different, I'm willing. But they're coming from a place of power at that point, right? Their own empowerment. Sometimes empowerment looks like recognizing how the dance has been damaging to the relationship and that you see a different way forward. That's empowering too. Sometimes empowerment means that you are willing to take on effort that maybe you haven't been willing to do before. Maybe you didn't know it was possible to connect with a spouse when they're not connected. And so knowing that there is a new path, and that is the nature of any empowerment, that there is a new path that I see that takes me to a better place, that's the heart of empowerment. You can't do that though if you have lost hope. And so part of that is still establishing that. That is an empowering exercise. When I sit down with people and go, these three elements, what's missing? Do you not know where you want to go? Do you not know how to do it? Or you're not willing to? And when they can look at that and say, I don't know how to do it. Okay, let's fill in the blank. I'm not even clear about where I want to get to. Okay, let's fill in the blank. The only one that is up to them is, am I willing to move in that direction? And empowerment is about the choice to do that.
And in most cases, when you were coaching couple, what stages of the 3 units of hope are they mostly in?
So I think it is fair to say that most people don't go into a marriage knowing how to build a strong marriage. That is a deficit of how we prepare young people premarital. And so they're doing, I call it doing on-the-job training in the most important relationship you've got. You don't have the tools, and they assume that, I've had a boyfriend or girlfriend before, but marriage is different. Marriage has a psychological shift that people make or they don't make. And so if they haven't had good examples of relationships, they don't know what that looks like. If they've had good examples, they may still not know the kind of the secret sauce that made it work, because that's often in the quiet between the couple. And so they go in somewhat unprepared. And so one of the things that I broke with from a lot of marital therapy is believing that I needed to be able to provide something of a roadmap. That's why I created the programs. Instead of just listening to a couple tell me where things have been bad and going, well, maybe you can communicate better. I was going, they need more than that, right? They need skills. They need a knowledge path, because no matter where, if they come into me, they have some idea of what they want to get to. They have some piece of that marriage that they want to move in some way. So they have number one in some way. We may need to clarify it. We may need to bring it into what reality looks like, but we have that. Most of the time, if they're making the effort to talk with me or be in one of my programs, they also are willing to do it. So what they're missing is how to do it. And that is a huge deficit that I see for people. And in fact, if I can begin to show that there is a way to do it, they are usually more willing to do it, and they have clarity on what they're trying to do, what the it is, right? They're trying to figure out that destination. So in many ways, it's a weak direction, unsure if it's even possible to do. So that's their piece, because they have a complete deficit of what it would look like, of how to do it.
Be safe and be positive. And don't forget to check out our social media handles. Thank you. Bye for now.